just not as aggressive, I'll use a smaller grunt tube.
Dude, oh my word, look at the whistler on that thing. Messed that beam up.
And I'm gonna go sneak my truck out. Yes! Oh, I smoked him. Look at that buck. We're gonna go ahead and look for him. Check that out. Well, I was inspired by Whitetail Cribs to do a video on some of the deer I've taken over the years. And Keith Snyder, he has an antler collection that's really cool. And he's gotten a lot of big bucks. Anyway, what I have are mostly New York and Pennsylvania deer. So I thought I would show you some of mine here. This deer here was my first buck. I was 15 and I got him with my bow. That was a pretty fun one there. So it was the first day of rifle season. In New York, then you had to be 16 to use a rifle, and I was only 15, so I got him the first day of gun season. My dad saw him coming up over the hillside, and he knew it was a decent buck, but he chose to pass it up because he knew it was heading up my way, and he came right underneath me, and I was afraid that he would see me, so I just waited till he started walking again, and as soon as he started walking again, then I drew my bow and I shot him at about 5 yards. So that was my first buck I got when I was 15 with my bow. And this was my second buck I got. I got this at my uncle's farm. He said he had been seeing a nice buck working in the fence row. I'm doing a scrape line, and he told me, why don't you go sit out there? And this buck came running through chasing a doe, and I used a doe bleat and called him right back to me, and I shot him at 10 yards off the ground. So that was my second buck, and I was pretty happy. I thought he was a monster. He's about almost 100-inch 8-point, and I thought he was a monster. And the next couple of years, then I really was trying to shoot something big, and I didn't get anything, and I ended up shooting this buck in 2010. So a couple of years later, this was my first buck with a gun in New York State. Just a little 8-point. He's a yearling buck. He's the only yearling deer I've ever shot. And yeah, so that was that. 2011, this elk here, then my dad and brother and a friend of ours went out to Colorado. We drew elk tags and mule deer tags, and I was the only one that was able to get an elk and a mule deer on that trip. It's probably the smallest 5-point elk they make, but I was pretty happy because to me it was an elk, and I was really pleased. So I was 19 when I got that elk, and then I got this mule deer here as well. And that one there, I missed him at 300 and some yards, and he must not have known where the shot came from because he kept coming closer, and I ended up shooting him at like 80 yards. So that was my first and actually only mule deer buck I ever got. I only ever drew one mule deer tag, and that was that one. So 2013, actually between then, 2012, I'll go back out to the other room out there. I'd gotten a buck I hunted for several years, and I ended up getting him. I'll show you that buck at the end. A pretty cool story. So then I had a pretty good running streak of getting bucks for a while then. For several years I just kept passing up bucks because they weren't big enough for then. My goal was like a 110-inch buck. I wanted to shoot over a 110-inch buck in New York and Pennsylvania. So this buck here was a Pennsylvania buck. I shot him early October, and he just was running a scrape line early October and or mid-October, and that was a buck I got with my bow. Then 2014, the next year, I shot this buck here. That was gun season, and he's a real heavy 8-point. The neighbor had shot at him and hit him right in the hock, and it wasn't, they had snow on the ground so they could follow blood, but there's hardly any blood. And he came up, and I saw him come up and go across the fence row, go into the corn, and I figured he's going to circle in the corn and come back out. And sure enough, he circled in the corn, and he came back out, had him back to where he came from 20 minutes before dark, and I shot him with my rifle. Most of the bucks I've gotten have actually been with my bow, but some were with my rifle. Then 2015, I shot this buck here in Pennsylvania. That was the first buck I ever got with my bow on film, so I was pretty happy about just harvesting a buck on film. And then this was the second buck I got. This was New York State, and probably one of the better bucks I've gotten. He's he's about a little over 18 inches inside. Scores about like a 120. So I got him on film 2015. 2016, this was gun season in New York State. It was Thanksgiving Day, and I just went up behind my parents' house and ended up shooting this buck. And he's not big really, but he was the first 9-point we had ever gotten off the farm. Most of the bucks were always just 8 points. Then the following year, Thanksgiving, then my dad and I, we did a little push, and we actually both got bucks, and that was gun season as well, but we both got bucks, and that was just a really fun hunt. We were both able to get deer. So then, if we go back over here, this deer here was 2016 in Pennsylvania. I shot this deer, just permission property, and he's got a really cool funky antler here with like a hole in it, so that was pretty cool to be able to shoot a unique deer early season. I grunted him in. He was with a bachelor group of other bucks. So that was 2016. I got him on film as well. Then there's got to be, oh yeah, this buck here. This was 2016 as well. I did a trip to South Dakota and got this buck on public land in South Dakota. So that was fun to go out of state and harvest a nice buck. Then moving on here, this buck here is one of my best New York bucks. This deer here scored right at 150 as mainframe 10-point. He's got a double brow tine, which makes him a 11-point. This was on a small property I owned, and the neighbor, after I shot him, said that they called this buck here the grandfather. They said this buck was an 8.5-year-old deer, and they had been watching it for a number of years, and I was lucky enough to harvest him on my own little property. So I was really blessed really to take this deer. Keith Snyder talks about antler quality, and this deer I would say has the best antler quality of any deer I've gotten. He's got just really heavy, solid, like marble-like antlers, and just a real old, gnarly deer. And I got him on film as well. Then that same year, I went to South Dakota again. This was 2019. So this buck here, I got in South Dakota. He's a mainframe 10-point and just a solid, really solid, heavy deer. He scored right at 150 as well. The cool, unique thing about this deer is his mass through his main beam, then his bladed tines are just really unique. Then 2020 in Pennsylvania, I didn't have a lot of time to hunt that year. I was busy working, and I like to fill my tags, so I called this 8-point in, and I shot this 8-point at like 15 yards, and just made for a really fun hunt to be able to call them in. A lot of these deer actually I called in and shot. This buck here I called in. This was same year, New York State 2020, and I honestly thought this deer was bigger than he is. He's a really pretty 9-point, but he's not as big as what I thought he was when he came in. But a really pretty deer. I got him on film. He was working a scrape, and it was a really pretty morning. Then over to here, this buck here, I shot this deer off the ground, and I saw him working some does up in a thicket, and he ended up coming across a CRP field, and I shot him at like probably 7 yards facing right at me. And the cool thing about this deer is I have the shed from him the previous day. If you move in here, I can show you. I've got the shed antler from him from the previous year, so that was fun to be able to shoot a deer that had the shed antler off of from the previous year. Then this buck here was gun season. I got this buck, and he had split G2s or G3s that were almost as tall, but he broke them both off, and just a really pretty unique deer. This deer was actually only a 3-year-old, and I'm sure he could have gotten a lot bigger. This was his shed as a 2-year-old. He has a really unique flat beam there, and just a really pretty deer. This deer here is the only one in here I actually didn't shoot. This deer I found shed hunting as a deadhead, and I actually had picked up his shed from the previous year. So that was kind of a shame to find him dead. Then this buck here, Pennsylvania, public land, gun season buck. I just scouted on a map where I wanted to go and went in and shot this deer basically first light the first morning. That was 2021 gun season. And this buck here, this was a pretty unique deer. He's not a big buck, but he's got a really cool gnarly rack. He's I guess he's a 7-point, but I knew he was an older deer, and he came in perfect. I got him on video, and I was able to shoot him, and he's not the biggest, but he looked cool, and it was too perfect not to shoot him. Then 2021, then my little brother and I and 2 friends went to Iowa, and going to Iowa I was hoping to shoot like a 150s, and the weather was warm and we just didn't see much. And the last day of season I was able to shoot this 8-point. He came in, I was hunting off the ground. I was on a public land parcel that didn't have a tree on it, or at least not a tree big enough to hang a tree stand, so I knew there were deer in there, so I hunted off the ground and I shot him, quartering too slightly off the ground, and I got him. And the coolest part of that hunt was actually the fact that my little brother got a really solid, nice 8-point, a little better than this one here, and I had helped set up his tree stand and set him up for that, and he got it, and it was really awesome to be able to go on a trip and be able to get a deer with my little brother. This deer here was gun season, one of those last Saturday hunts that he came out, and he's got a cool little kicker off the back there of his G1 brow tine there, but just too big to pass up on the last day of gun season. So then we go back over here, then bow season this year, then the farm that I work at right now, then they gave me permission to hunt. That was one of the perks to working on the farm. So I ran trail cameras all summer and got a good idea of what bucks were in the area. This buck here, I only really ever got one picture of him, and it was when he was still in velvet. Anyway, I ended up shooting him off the ground. I called him in and he came right in. I shot him facing right at me. He thought I was another buck. I was grunting at him, and he came in posturing, and I shot him at maybe 15 yards, just facing right at me. It was just really cool to get that buck. 120 class New York buck. And this buck here was gun season this year. He's, I don't know what he would score, but he was a big gnarly old buck, and it was just fun to take him. And then this buck here is the only one in here that that someone else shot. My wife shot this buck. It was her first buck, and it was really cool. First day gun season, he came chasing a doe across the field, and she put a perfect shot on him. I tried to get it on video, but I was also helping her. We were laying prone on the ground, and it was challenging to make it happen, but we got the gun in position, but I didn't get it on film very well. And there was a bachelor group at 8 points, and he was one of the nicer little 8 points, and it was really fun to be with her while she got her first buck. So that was really fun. If we go into the other room here, I got a couple other bucks I'd like to show you. So 2012, then actually back up 2011, this deer here I shot, and I hit him too far back. Actually, not too far back. I just hit him right in the back, and my arrow only went in about 4 inches. I didn't get penetration to kill him, and I thought he was a 3-year-old that year, but the longer I've hunted, the more I realized a lot of our bucks are actually younger than what I thought they were. So he would have been 2 years old the year I hit him, and then this was him as a 3-year-old Pennsylvania deer. Anyways, I ran trail cameras and knew the deer was there, and this was the first deer that I was able to call in with the snort wheeze. I snort wheezed, and he postured and came right in, and I shot him like 18 yards and saw him go down the field. So he's I think he's just shy of, I think he's like 112 inches, but he's 19 3/8 inside, which for one of my first bucks then, I was really happy with him. So he was the biggest one and the most history I had with him, so I decided to mount that deer. Then 2014, then this buck here, then I shot him in public land in northern PA. I had seen him late summer in velvet, and I knew he was mainframe 10 point is what I was guessing it was. I figured he'd score about 140, and he's one of the only deer where I shot, and when I walked up on him, I just realized he was much bigger than I realized when I shot him. So it turned out to be a pretty crazy rack deer. He's got 16 total points. Both G2s are split. He has bladed, really tall bladed brow tines, small drop tine here, and he just got crazy stuff going on here. His main beam comes up and just has short points here, but his G2 on the back here is probably 10 inches long, and he's grossed 168, so that was my biggest Pennsylvania whitetail. Then when I'd gone to Colorado the first time elk hunting, then I always wanted to go back and be able to do a bow hunt. So I collected preference points, and in season 2021 season, then I drew my tag I wanted and did all the scouting I could on X and Go Hunt, and figured out where I wanted to hunt. And 2 buddies went with me for the fun and to help me, and we had a great hunt. And this bull here, then we heard him bugling, and we could tell he was with cows, so we tried calling him in, but he wouldn't leave his cows. So I just kind of slowly still hunted after the herd, and after they kind of bedded down late morning, then I could still hear the bull every once in a while just bugle real low. So I just kept moving in on them slow, and fortunately for me, I was able to get close enough that I saw a cow stand up, and then this bull stood up, and I could see he had a fairly decent rack, so I ended up shooting him, and I shot him perfect shot on him at like 45 yards, and heard him crash. And he's not the biggest bull out there. He scored about he scored about 260. So, but for my first archery buck or archery bull, I was super happy to be able to get that bull. So that's the extent of the deer and the elk I've shot. Mainly bow hunting whitetails is my passion. Shed hunting is also something I really enjoy doing. So I have different sheds here from all over. Most of these are New York and Pennsylvania. Here I have, this is my best set. This would have been a New York buck, and he's won for probably high 130s as a 9-point. So this deer would have been a really nice deer. So anyway, I enjoy hunting and shed hunting, and that's the extent of my collection deer. So thanks for watching.